After my surgery, Mom told the family she'd been sleeping in a chair beside me. I spent 3 nights watching the door never open. The nurse brought me my phone charger. My mother brought flowers for the Facebook post. Have you ever been lying in a hospital bed for 3 days, watching the door every time it opened, hoping it would be your mother, knowing it wouldn't be, and then seeing a photo of yourself unconscious on her Facebook with a caption about how she hadn't left your side? My name's Bennett, I'm 32, and I need to tell you about the 3 nights I spent in a hospital room learning the difference between a mother who loves you and a mother who loves the idea of loving you, which sounds like the same thing until you're the one lying in the bed with staples in your stomach and a dead phone and no one coming through the door. But that part comes later. First, you need to understand my family because without context, the hospital thing just sounds like a bad week. With context, it sounds like the last 32 years of my life. My mother, Noelle, is a wonderful woman. I want to be clear about that up front because I know how these stories go and I know what you're already expecting me to say. But she is, by most external measurements, a wonderful woman. She volunteers at her church. She remembers every neighbor's birthday. She sends cards for every occasion, handwritten, stamped, mailed on time. If you met her at a party, you'd walk away thinking, what a lovely person. And you'd be right. She is a lovely person. She's just not a lovely person to me. Not in the ways that count. Not when the cameras are off. And yes, I mean cameras literally. But we'll get there. I have a younger sister named Dakota. Dakota is 28, and growing up, Dakota was the one my mother could see. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that when we were in the same room, my mother's eyes tracked to Dakota the way a compass needle tracks north. It wasn't malicious. I genuinely don't think my mother woke up every morning and decided to love one child more than the other. It was more like a frequency thing, like Dakota broadcast on a wavelength my mother could receive, and I broadcast on one she couldn't quite tune into, and over time, the static became the relationship. When Dakota had a bad day at school, my mother would cancel plans to sit with her, make hot chocolate, and do that thing where she'd brush Dakota's hair while they watched movies together. When I had a bad day at school, my mother would say, "You'll figure it out, you always do," which sounds empowering if you don't think about it too hard, but what it actually means is, I trust you to handle your own pain, so I don't have to. When Dakota got a C on a test, my mother hired a tutor, sat with her during study sessions, and called the teacher to discuss learning strategies. When I got straight A's, my mother said, "That's great, honey," without looking up from whatever she was doing for Dakota, which was usually something, because there was always something. When Dakota made the volleyball team, my mother attended every single game for 3 seasons with a homemade poster that said, "Go Dakota," in glitter letters. When I won a regional engineering competition at 16, my mother asked me what time dinner was. When Dakota got her heart broken at 17, my mother took a personal day from work, rented 3 movies, bought 2 pints of ice cream, and they spent the entire day on the couch processing feelings. When I broke my wrist falling off a bike at 15, my mother drove me to urgent care, sat in the waiting room reading a magazine for 2 hours, and on the way home asked if we could stop at the grocery store because she needed ingredients for Dakota's birthday cake that weekend. I could keep going. I have a whole mental catalog of these, organized chronologically because the self-sufficient son keeps records even when he pretends he doesn't. But you get the pattern. Dakota was a person to my mother. I was a function. Dakota had feelings that needed attending. I had problems that needed solving, preferably by myself, preferably quietly, preferably without making anyone else's day harder. I became the self-sufficient one. Not because I wanted to be, but because the alternative was asking for attention from someone who'd already given all of hers away. I cooked my own meals by 14. Did my own laundry by 12, applied to college alone, moved myself in alone, graduated alone. My mother posted a photo from my graduation ceremony with a long caption about the proudest day of my life. She'd spent the actual ceremony in the parking lot on the phone with Dakota, who was having some crisis about a roommate, and she missed my name being called. I know because I looked for her in the crowd during the walk, and her seat was empty. But the Facebook post got 280 likes, and 41 comments about what an incredible mother she was, and I suppose that's almost the same thing. It's not the same thing, it's not even close. When I got my first apartment after college, my mother posted a photo of herself helping me unpack, both of us smiling, boxes in the background. That photo was taken during a 15-minute visit. I moved everything myself over 2 days. She showed up at the end, moved one box from the hallway to the living room, took the photo, and left. The post said, "My baby's first place, helped him get settled all weekend. Empty nest mama is proud and only a little bit crying." She was home by 2 p.m. When my father died 6 years ago, my mother posted daily about grief. Beautiful posts. Vulnerable, raw, honest. People sent flowers, sent cards, sent messages of support. She received an outpouring of love so genuine it almost made up for the fact that I planned the entire funeral, paid for it, wrote the eulogy, picked the casket, coordinated with the cemetery, and never once received a private moment of comfort from her. She was too busy being publicly devastated to notice her son was privately falling apart. The Facebook version of my father's death got 400 likes. The real version got me a $9,000 bill and a week of crying alone in my car before work. Here's where the money comes in, because it always does. 5 years ago, my mother mentioned she was struggling with her mortgage. I started sending $800 a month without being asked. Just set up an auto pay and told her it was handled. She said thank you once and never mentioned it again. $800 a month for 3 years. That's $28,800 if you're keeping track, and I was, because self-sufficient sons always keep track even when they pretend they don't. There was also Dakota's emergency car repair, $2,400. My mother's dental work that insurance didn't cover, $3,200. Christmas gifts that were never reciprocated, $4,000 over 5 years, give or take. Dakota's wedding gift, $5,000 because I wanted to be generous and because some part of me thought maybe generosity was the frequency my mother could receive. And miscellaneous loans to both of them that were never discussed again, $6,000, conservatively. I stopped counting at $49,400 because the next number was going to be $50,000. And something about that round number felt like it would break something inside me that I needed to keep intact. Meanwhile, my mother co-signed Dakota's apartment lease, paid half her car insurance, bought her baby's crib and stroller and car seat, and sent her $500 a month for groceries, which, based on Dakota's Instagram, appeared to be mostly spent at restaurants and Target. When I pointed this out once, and I still regret it, my mother said, "Your sister needs more help. You've always been so independent." And there it was, the thesis of my entire childhood in 2 sentences. You don't need me, so I don't show up. She needs me, so she gets everything. The reward for being self-sufficient was being left alone. Then I almost died. I say that casually because that's how it felt at the time, like an inconvenience that happened to coincide with a busy week. I'd been having abdominal pain for about 3 weeks. Sharp, persistent, getting worse. I ignored it because I was in the middle of a major project at work, because I was covering my mother's mortgage, because I was driving Dakota to her prenatal appointments, her husband was traveling for work, which Dakota seemed to accept without question, and which I suspected meant something else entirely, but kept my mouth shut about because self-sufficient sons don't ask questions that make family dinners awkward. I collapsed at my desk on a Wednesday afternoon, just folded forward mid-email like someone had pulled my plug. I remember the email I was writing. It was about a quarterly budget report, and I remember thinking as the room went sideways that the report was due Friday and I needed to finish it, which is the most on-brand thing a self-sufficient son could think while losing consciousness. My coworker Parker caught me before I hit the keyboard and called 911. The paramedics asked who my emergency contact was. Parker said, "His mother." I think. I was conscious enough to mumble, "Don't bother." They took me anyway. ERCT scan. Perforated ulcer. Emergency surgery. 4 hours on the table. The surgeon told me later, with that particular calm that doctors use when they want you to understand the gravity without causing panic, that if I'd waited another day or two, peritonitis would have set in and we'd be having a very different conversation. Or, more accurately, we wouldn't be having a conversation at all. The ulcer had likely been developing for months, aggravated by stress, irregular meals, and the kind of chronic low-level anxiety that comes from being everyone's safety net while nobody is yours. My boss, Jensen, called my mother from my phone while I was in pre-op. I know this because he told me afterward. Her exact words were, "Oh no, keep me updated." She did not ask which hospital. Jensen told her. She said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." That was it. No follow-up call. No, I'm on my way. No, is he okay? Just keep me updated. Like I was a package she was tracking. I woke up from anesthesia at 11 p.m. on Wednesday night, disoriented, in pain, alone. The room was dark except for the monitor lights and the glow from the hallway through the half-open door. I reached for the call button because for one confused, post-anesthesia second, I thought someone was sitting in the chair next to my bed. There was no one. The chair was empty. My phone was dead on the tray table, and nobody had brought a charger. The night nurse, a woman named Hazel, found me a charger from the lost and found box at the nurse's station. She plugged it in, checked my IV, and then sat down in the empty chair for about 10 minutes. She didn't say much, just asked if there was anyone she should call. I said no. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said and told me to press the button if I needed anything. When she left, the room felt emptier than it had before she'd been in it, which is a specific kind of loneliness I wouldn't wish on anyone. Night 2. The same nurse brought me a warm blanket without being asked and said, "Your vitals look good. You're doing great." Those 9 words were the kindest thing anyone had said to me in weeks. I almost cried, which is embarrassing to admit, but I'm telling you the truth. And the truth is that a stranger's professional courtesy felt like more care than my family had shown me in months. And if that doesn't tell you everything about where I was, nothing will. The man in the room next door, an older guy named Oliver recovering from knee surgery, had visitors constantly. I could hear them through the wall. Laughter, conversations, the rustle of plastic bags being unpacked. His wife, Evelyn, came every day with homemade soup in a thermos and crossword puzzles. His daughter brought balloons on day 2. His buddy from the VFW showed up with a deck of cards. I counted his visits because I had nothing else to count. 14 in 3 days. 14 people walked through his door in the time that 0 people walked through mine. Well, 1 person walked through mine for 11 minutes, but I'm getting to that. On the second day, Oliver's wife, Evelyn, brought 2 containers of soup instead of 1. She set the extra on my tray table without saying a word, just a small smile and a nod, and went back to Oliver's side of the room. Chicken noodle, still warm. I ate it slowly because I hadn't had anything that tasted like someone cared in a very long time, and I wanted it to last. Night 3, the door opened at 8 p.m. and I didn't even look up. I'd stopped expecting anyone. My mother arrived on day 2 at 3:15 p.m. I know the time because I'd been watching the clock the way you watch a clock when you're waiting for someone who keeps not coming. She brought grocery store flowers still in the plastic sleeve, set them on the windowsill without putting them in water. The first thing she said was not, "How are you feeling?" or, "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." The first thing she said was, "Scoot up a little, the angle's weird." She took 4 photos. I watched her review each one, zooming in, checking the lighting. She selected the one where the flowers were most visible and her hand was resting on my arm, which she'd placed there specifically for the shot. She typed the caption while standing in my hospital room, posted it, checked the first 3 comments, smiled at her phone and said, "I need to get to the store before it closes." She kissed my forehead. It lasted about 1 second. Then she was gone. She'd brought Dakota, who stayed in the hallway the entire time scrolling her phone, never entered the room, never said hello. I could see the top of her head through the window in the door. My mother also brought a small overnight bag that she set down next to the chair with a little performance of settling in. I packed for the long haul, she said. She took photos of the bag next to the chair, the flowers on the sill. Then she had a 7-minute phone conversation with a friend while still in my room, describing how scary this has been, and how she'd been basically living at the hospital. I lay there listening to her construct a fictional version of events in real time, 4 feet from the actual events, and I thought, this is the most honest she's ever been about who she is. Not the words she was saying. The fact that she was saying them here, now in front of me, without any awareness that I could hear the gap between the story and the truth. Before she left, Dakota took a photo from the doorway of my mother, sleeping in the chair. This was staged. My mother positioned herself, closed her eyes, and held still while Dakota snapped it. Then she repacked the overnight bag and said she'd be right back. Just running home to check on the dog. She never came back. The sleeping photo was posted at 9:47 p.m. that night. Caption, Night 2. Still here. Not going anywhere. She was at home watching television. 11 minutes. I timed it on the clock above the door. The big post came on day 3. 3 days by my baby's side. Haven't left this hospital. Mama Bear doesn't sleep when her cub is hurting. Grateful for the nurses and doctors taking care of my boy. God is good. Photo carousel. Flowers on the windowsill. Me looking groggy. Posted without my knowledge or consent. The overnight bag staged next to the chair, and the tired-looking selfie she'd taken with no makeup specifically for this purpose. She'd tagged the hospital, thanked the staff for letting me stay past visiting hours, which they hadn't because she'd never been there past visiting hours, because she'd been there for 11 minutes total. 340 likes, 47 comments. You're such an amazing mom. He's so lucky to have you. Mother of the Year. I'm praying for a speedy recovery. She'd also set up a GoFundMe for Bennett's medical expenses that I didn't know about. Link in the comments. It had already collected $1,400 by the time I found out. The money was going to her PayPal. My coworker Parker sent me a screenshot of the post with the message, "Your mom is a saint. Feel better, bro." I stared at it for a very long time. Not angry, not sad exactly. Just this specific feeling of watching someone describe a room you're sitting in and getting every single detail wrong. And 340 people believing the wrong version and realizing that the wrong version is the only one that will ever exist for most of them. My Aunt Emery commented, "You're the strongest woman I know. He doesn't deserve you." My mother replied with a crying emoji, and I just wish he'd let me help more. You know how he is. And just like that, I wasn't a man who'd been alone in a hospital for 3 days. I was a difficult, ungrateful son whose wonderful mother was trying her best. The narrative was built and furnished and decorated before I even knew there was a narrative. That night in the hospital, phone finally charged, scrolling through my mother's Facebook timeline, I saw it all laid out like evidence. Every major event in my life had a corresponding post where she was the hero. Graduation, apartment, Dad's funeral. My promotion, which she'd somehow heard about before I told her. My birthday posts, which she'd never actually celebrated in person. Hundreds of comments over the years about what an incredible mother she was. 600 people believed a fiction. So did I for about 30 years. My mother has 2 sons. There's the real one. The one who lies in hospital beds alone and moves apartments by himself and plans funerals nobody helps him pay for. And there's the Facebook one. The one who has a loving, attentive, self-sacrificing mother who never misses a moment. The Facebook son gets birthday cakes with candles. The real son gets a text at 9 p.m. saying, "Happy birthday, sweetie. Hope it was good." The Facebook son has a mother who stays by his side through surgery. The real son has a nurse named Hazel who brings him a phone charger from the lost and found. I wasn't her son. I was her content. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't send a manifesto or call a family meeting or post my own version of events. I just stopped. Stopped sending the $800 mortgage payment. Stopped driving Dakota to her appointments. Stopped answering calls on the first ring. Stopped showing up to Sunday dinners I was never actually invited to, but attended anyway because I thought that's what families did. You just showed up and hoped someone noticed. I stopped performing the role of the good son. No Mother's Day call, no birthday gift, no reply to the family group chat. I became exactly as invisible as they'd always treated me, except now I was choosing it instead of accepting it. And the difference between chosen silence and imposed silence is that one of them has power. I also reported the GoFundMe as fraudulent because it was, blocked it, changed my emergency contact at work from my mother to Parker, canceled the streaming services my mother and sister had been using on my account, canceled the Amazon Prime membership Dakota had been ordering from for 2 years. Each cancellation took about 30 seconds. 5 years of generosity, undone in a weekend. The mortgage payment was due on the 1st. My mother didn't mention it until the 14th, and only because the bank sent a late notice. She called and said, "Did you forget to send the payment this month?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "How are you feeling after surgery?" Not, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Just, "Where's the money?" I didn't answer. She called 4 more times that week, left voicemails that got progressively more confused, then annoyed, then worried, but worried about the money, not about me. The progression was almost funny if you took a step back far enough. Voicemail. 1 was confused. "Hey honey, just checking in, think there was a banking issue this month." Voicemail 2 was annoyed. "Bennett, I really need you to call me back about the payment." Voicemail 3 was worried. "Is everything okay? The bank is sending me letters now." And voicemail 4 was guilt-tripping. "I don't know what I did to deserve being ignored like this. I'm your mother." Not one of them mentioned the surgery. Not one asked how I was healing. Not one acknowledged that the last time she'd seen me, I was in a hospital bed with staples in my stomach, and she'd been there for 11 minutes. Dakota texted once, "Netflix isn't working," with 2 question marks like the second one would fix the first. I stared at that text for probably too long, trying to decide if it was funny or devastating, and settled on both. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for my mother to notice I was gone from her life. 3 weeks. And even then, it was because the money stopped, not because I did. 21 days of silence from the son she supposedly sat beside for 72 hours, and she didn't think to check on me until the bank sent a letter. I could have died in that hospital, and the first call would have been about the mortgage. I know that sounds dramatic. It's not dramatic. It's math. The evidence is in the timeline. My mother showed up at my apartment eventually. I knew she would. The performed mother always needs an audience, and I'd taken hers away. She sat in her car in the visitor parking for 20 minutes before knocking, which I know because I saw her from my window, sitting there with her hands on the steering wheel, working up the courage or maybe rehearsing her lines, hard to tell with her. And honestly, at this point, the distinction between the two doesn't matter much. When I opened the door, she was crying. Real tears or performed tears, I genuinely couldn't tell anymore. And that's maybe the saddest part of all of this, that my own mother has cried in front of me so strategically and so often that I can no longer tell the difference between her real pain and her curated pain. "Why are you punishing me for caring?" she said. "One visit to the hospital shouldn't erase everything I've done for you." I asked her to name 3 things she'd done for me in the past year. 3. That's all. She started listing things she needed that I did for her. The mortgage, driving Dakota, the dental work. She was listing my generosity and calling it her motherhood, framing my service as her sacrifice, and she genuinely, truly, in the deepest part of herself, could not see the difference. I said, "You told 340 people you sat beside me for 3 days. You were there for 11 minutes. I counted. The nurse brought me my phone charger. You brought flowers for a photo." She said I was being ungrateful. Said I didn't understand how hard it was to see her child in a hospital. I asked why she didn't stay then. Why, if it was so hard. She left after 11 minutes and posted about it from her couch. She didn't have an answer. She had a look, though. That particular look she gets when reality bumps up against the narrative she's built, and she has to choose which one to believe. She always chooses the narrative, and she always will. The family dinner happened 2 weeks later. My mother's idea, neutral ground, a restaurant she picked, we can all talk like adults. She'd prepared a speech about how families aren't perfect and we all could do better, and I've been thinking a lot about how to move forward. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge the Facebook post, didn't acknowledge the GoFundMe, didn't acknowledge the 11 minutes. The speech was about moving forward without ever establishing what she was moving forward from, which is a neat trick if you can pull it off, and she almost could. Dakota was there, sitting next to my mother like a support beam, and at one point during my mother's speech about mutual understanding, Dakota said, "Mom was at the hospital for days. I saw the posts." She said it with complete sincerity. No irony. No suspicion. She was citing fiction as evidence and didn't even know it. And I looked at her across that restaurant table and realized she wasn't being cruel. She was being oblivious. She had only ever experienced the attentive version of our mother, the version that took a week off for wisdom teeth and moved in for 10 days for a broken ankle and was there for the baby's delivery and the first 2 weeks of recovery. So she genuinely believed the attentive version was real. The posts were her proof. The posts were all she'd ever needed. She had never had to check whether the caption matched the room because in her experience, it always had. I said, "You told 340 people you sat beside me for 3 days. You were there for 11 minutes. I timed it. The nurse brought me my phone charger. You brought flowers for a photo. You posted a sleeping picture at 9:47 p.m. from your couch at home. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with you telling those same 340 people the truth." My mother's face went through something I'd never seen before. This rapid sequence of emotions. Shock that I had specifics, shame that I'd been counting, and then, underneath everything, anger, not at herself, at me, for keeping score. "I can't do that," she said. "Then we're done here," I said. I left. Nobody followed me out. Nobody ever does. 6 months later. Scar healed. Promotion at work. Jensen gave me the project lead on a contract I'd been working toward for 2 years, called me into his office and said, "You've been carrying more than anyone knows. Time someone noticed." I almost told him he had no idea how right he was. New apartment, smaller, but mine. No auto pay going to anyone else's mortgage. No emergency contacts who forget which hospital you're in. I met a woman named Callie through Parker's wife about 3 months after the surgery. She works in urban planning, drives a paid-off Subaru, and has this habit of asking questions that make you realize you haven't been asked a real question in years. Our first date was coffee at a place near the river. She was 15 minutes early, which I noticed because I was 20 minutes early. And we spent the first 5 minutes laughing about the fact that we were both the kind of people who show up too early to things because being late feels like a character flaw. I liked her immediately. Not the electric, dramatic kind of liking. The quiet kind. The kind that feels like sitting down in a chair that actually fits. On our third date, I told her the hospital story. All of it. The 11 minutes, the flowers, the Facebook post, the sleeping photo, the GoFundMe, the 340 likes, the nurse with the charger, the soup from a stranger's wife, the 3 weeks of silence. She listened without interrupting, which was already more than my family had managed in 32 years. When I finished, she didn't say, "That's awful," or "I'm sorry." She said, "Show me the scar." I lifted my shirt. She traced it with her finger, gently, carefully, and said, "You survived that alone. That's not sad, Bennett. That's proof you're stronger than anyone who should have been there." I think about that line almost every day. Not because it fixed anything, because one sentence doesn't undo 32 years of being someone's content instead of someone's son, but because it was the first time someone looked at my self-sufficiency and saw what it actually cost instead of what it conveniently provided. Callie has a flaw, by the way. She's catastrophically bad at parking. Like, genuinely alarming. 3-point turns that become 9-point turns. She once parallel parked so badly that a stranger offered to help, and she thanked him and then did it worse on the second attempt. I love her anyway. Nobody's perfect, and she doesn't pretend to be. Which is more than I can say for some people with 340 likes and a talent for staging overnight bags. I ran into Nurse Hazel at a coffee shop about 8 months after the surgery. She recognized me immediately. Room 412, right? The quiet one. I bought her coffee. We talked for an hour. She told me she remembered me because in 12 years of nursing, I was one of the few patients who never once complained about being alone, and that worried her more than the patients who did. I told her she was the only person who took care of me those 3 nights. She teared up. I didn't. I'm done crying about it. But I sent the nursing staff at St. Luke's a proper thank you the next week, with a note that said, "Hazel and night shift brought me a charger and a blanket and 10 minutes of kindness when I needed it most." She should know that mattered. My mother still posts about me on Facebook. Last Sunday evening, I was sitting on my couch, TV on low leftover pasta on the coffee table. My phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. She'd posted a throwback photo. Me as a kid, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on her lap, both of us smiling. The caption, "My firstborn, my rock. Missing the simple days." 89 likes. 12 comments. So sweet. He's lucky to have you. I stared at the photo for a minute. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt like I was looking at a woman who loves a version of me that only exists in photographs. A woman who will always be a wonderful mother on Facebook and an empty chair in real life. A woman who brought flowers for the photo and left before they had water in the vase. I closed the app, finished my pasta. Watched the rest of my show. The phone buzzed twice more. I didn't check it. My name's Bennett. I'm 32. And I spent 3 nights in a hospital watching a door that never opened, while my mother told the internet she never left my side. The nurse brought me my phone charger, my mother brought flowers for the Facebook post, and somewhere between the 11-minute visit and the 340 likes, I finally understood. I was never the son she loved. I was the son she performed. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in it, if you're the self-sufficient one, the one who never asks for anything, the one whose mother talks about loving more than she actually does it, I need you to hear something. You're not too independent to deserve attention. You're not too strong to need someone in the chair. And you're not ungrateful for wanting the real thing instead of the caption. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.